welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefanía Bravo in Quito, Ecuador. This is from the south. Guyana's Chief Justice Roxanne George has ruled that the returning officer for Region 4 return to the process of tabulating the statements of roles for the region and complete the process before making an official declaration. The Chief Justice also ruled that the Guyana Elections Commissions can only make a final declaration upon the completion of the vote counting process by the returning officer. As such, the counting process will be resumed on Thursday at 11 a.m. But it will be up to the returning officer to decide whether the process will start all over again or continue from where it was suspended. The case was taken before the court by the opposition PPP party. Its authorities said the party has been vindicated by the decision of the court. Region 4 is pivotal to the final general elections results as the biggest of the country. And earlier in the day, the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, led a delegation of 4 governmental leaders to Guyana. The chairwoman of CARICOM was joined by Prime Ministers Roosevelt Skerrit of Dominica, Ralph Gonsalves of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Keith Michel of Grenada for the 2-day mission. Their aim is to assist and meet with the parties in an effort to ease tension and arrive at a resolution following the unease that arose following the general elections. Moving on, members of the Dominican Medical School have taken to the streets of Santo Domingo to demand their pensions and wage increases as agreed with the government. Our correspondent Daisy Toussaint has more.
The Dominican Medical School has organized a march to reach the National Palace, demanding that the government respect its agreements on pensions and wage increases. Protesters say that this peaceful march rejects the lack of compliance by the Ministry of Health. The health minister had asked them to call off the march because, according to him, it was not the appropriate time to protest due to the COVID-19 outbreak, adding that they haven't violated the agreements, but that the priority is the emergency response to the coronavirus. But the director of the Dominican Medical School says that authorities gave him no other choice and that he's open to dialogue to resolve the conflict. He said that this march wouldn't affect medical attention in public hospitals, but that the fight will continue if their demands are not met.
We thank Daisy Toussaint for that report. While Cuba has yet to report any case of the COVID-19 virus, the nation has improved preventive measures to avoid an outbreak. At the same time, the island is dealing with the latest unilateral measures by the U.S., which banned charter flights from its territory. For more, let's go to our correspondent in Havana, Nayera Tardo.
Let's have a look at some of the most important topics in Cuba and the rest of the Caribbean. On March 10th, the United States suspended all public charter flights coming from their territory to most of Cuba, with an exception of the José Martí International Airport in Havana. But the airport has now been limited to 3,600 flights back and forth. President Miguel Díaz-Canel rejected the unilateral measure through a message on his Twitter account. The foreign minister, Bruno Rodriguez, also took to social media to say that the prohibition of charter flights caused damage to Cuban families, and preventive measures to prevent any possible outbreak.
We've decided to add new measures to isolate suspected cases in military hospitals, with the exception of the Carlos J. Finlay Hospital. This is an important decision, which we already had a list of infrastructure with all the necessary conditions, but new hospitals have been added.
Marrero Cruz said the main authorities from all provinces and municipalities have been informed about the prevention plan to outbreaks. Health Minister José Ángel Portal Miranda said all centers and institutions which are part of the health system are ready to face and control the spread of the virus.
We have the installations for treatment and observation. We have centers across our territory. And after meeting with provincial authorities, we can be certain the medical staff is prepared and that we have the resources. These allow us to have a first phase of 3,100 beds available to treat the disease. and will be adding more according to circumstances, and if the virus enters the country.
In the rest of the Caribbean, Haiti has blocked the entrance of passengers coming from China, Italy, Germany, South Korea, and France. According to a report by the Interior Minister of the country, airlines flying into the island should block the boarding of any passenger coming from high-risk zones. Haiti's police members also recently went back to the streets to demand their right to unionize as well as a wage increases and better working conditions. In the last few weeks, the government announced an insurance and housing program for the police force. But officers say they want to become a union, which is reflected in the country's constitution and will remain on the streets until their demands are met. And the government of St. Lucia has strengthened its preventive measures over the coronavirus. According to local media, the health department is preparing staff to face possible risks, and authorities ask citizens to avoid panic and follow their prevention plan. That's all I have for now. In upcoming newscasts, we'll be bringing you more news on Cuba and on the Caribbean. Until next time.
We'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Bolivia's de facto government has defied the Legislative Assembly after they censored the embattled defense minister, as just hours after the fact, he was authorized to hold the charge, ignoring the fact that, according to the Constitution, a censored minister must be dismissed.
The de facto government took less than 24 hours to once again name Luis Lopez as defense minister. The Legislative Assembly had earlier censored him for failing to show to answer questions about November's coup for the third time.
I have ratified my trust in Luis Fernando Lopez as defense minister, because his role is an important one in the way back to democracy. Minister Lopez, I ask you to continue working with the same patriotism and efficiency you have maintained.
But Article 158 of the Constitution says that a censored minister must be dismissed.
They are breaking the law, and that is highly alarming because all of today's declarations have gone against the Constitution. The de facto president is only concerned with the presidential campaign and attacking the leading candidate.
According to the Legislative Assembly, the de facto president has violated the Constitution.
For us, Luis Lopez is the former defense minister, and everything he does from now on has to be void and null. He is usurping the functions of the office, and the lower house must start the appropriate procedures.
One of last November's coup leaders, former civic leader Fernando Camacho, has revealed that Lopez was behind a military turn against ousted President Evo Morales, and was named defense minister as reward.
It was my dad who spoke with the army so they would stay in their bases. He spoke directly with Luis Lopez, the current defense minister. That is why he has that position now, because it was promised to him. My dad also had a similar talks with the police.
One of the first acts by the de facto government was to pay out $5 million to the armed forces and to pass a decree that cleared them of all responsibility for their participation in the coup.
Indigenous people from northeastern Brazil protested in Brasilia to demand the demarcation of their lands and that the far-right government reject a bill that authorizes mining in ancestral territories. Hundreds from Bahia communities traveled to the nation's capital to demand that Jair Bolsonaro's government leave out their lands from the ongoing allocations to commercial investors. They also condemned the many massacres their people have been victims of historically at the behest of business interests.
We want to repudiate this current government that wants to slaughter us, to take away our rights. We are here, 150 leaders saying, demarcation now, demarcation now, demarcation now. We are also against the mining project. We do not want mining in our territory. Our territory is for life. Our territory is a territory that produces, and therefore we want to defend it.
The Pataxó people and the Tupinambá people, among other indigenous peoples in Brazil, have been suffering a lot of massacres due to this land dispute with the white men.
And in Sao Paulo, indigenous protesters who had been occupying territory belonging to construction company Tenda have been evicted. It was here that over 4,000 trees, which were part of the Jarawa Environmental Reserve, were cut down.
A month and a half ago, the MBYA Guarani people took a historic step by occupying land in their village that had been the property of construction company Tenda. They didn't claim the territory, but wanted to restore the vegetation following the destruction of thousands of trees by the company, in compliance with Sao Paulo's town hall.
Every tree is our brother, our sister. That is important to us, but they don't understand it. They want to destroy nature, but we won't allow it. That is why we are here praying.
Tenda cleared the space to develop a real estate project inside Jarawa Park, an area of environmental protection considered a green oasis located half an hour outside the largest city in South America.
The eviction request has to be denied because a crime was committed here. When a crime is committed in the street, people go to jail. Why doesn't Tenda go to jail if they committed a crime?
Karai Tataendi is 107 years old. For a month and a half, he has been camping on the land owned by the construction company. Among the 4,000 trees cut down by the company, he can recognize the remains of 500 that were part of the native vegetation.
This hurts so much in my heart. That is why I always sing, asking God. This is why God wants to end with the world. The end of the world, as they call it. God's answer is that human beings will die.
To avoid a bloodbath on the hands of Mayor Bruno Covas, Guarani has decided to vacate the land and will remain at the gate until the vegetation is recovered.
It won't be the mayor who ends more than 500 years of resistance.
On one side, there is construction company Tenda, with money from Itaú Bank and 10% of it owned by Jorge Paulo Alemán, one of the 42 richest men in the world. On the other side, the indigenous people, who demand the land be recovered and destined to an area of environmental protection, an urgent idea for a country that in 2019 saw massive swaths of its Amazon region burned down due to deforestation.
Moving on, Ecuador's President Lenín Moreno has announced a new set of austerity measures, which he said was in response to the downturn in oil prices and repercussions of the COVID-19 outbreak. The measures include budget cuts in public services amounting to $800 million and the elimination of 3 public institutions. The president also said that the state is seeking new loans for the amount of $2.4 billion. Our correspondent in Quito, Denise Herrera, has more.
The government of Ecuador announced new economic measures to confront the economic situation around the world and to confront the coronavirus situation. In this context, the United Workers Front of Ecuador is rejecting the latest economic measure announced by President Lenín Moreno. They are rejecting the cuts in public sectors and also they are rejecting the new situation of the public workers. They said that Moreno is affecting directly the workers and that the government is violated also the Constitution. In this context, the workers said that they will take action if Moreno continues to these neoliberal policies in Ecuador.
Moving on, after a month-long campaign generating high expectations for the 10th of March, once again, the Venezuelan opposition failed in its call to mobilize great numbers.
Everyone to the street was the call out, but people didn't respond. The opposition campaign sought to reactivate its support base, but the reality was that it wouldn't be so enticing. The manipulation, the strategy, nevertheless, their intention was to get to the National Assembly for the cameras and for a conflict.
The time will come when we will be more organized, with a clear structure to get where we need to go, to get where we are supposed to go.
Violence is big business. Now the opposition is calling for another mobilization on Thursday. And, just in case, another date has been set for March 16th.
For them, it is a big business to hold demonstrations. To announce demonstrations is a business. They are given money. They don't have to give it to anyone. They receive authorization to continue stealing the resources of Venezuela. When you say elections, it's like exorcism. They don't want it because they would lose the business they have, which is set up with violence.
Chavismo was mobilized, once again standing in defense of peace, sovereignty, and the parliamentary elections, which the extremist sectors of the opposition have rejected.
What they want is business through violence. That is why they want to disturb the peace of the people, but they won't be able to beat us.
They don't want elections because it doesn't suit them, because this river of people here are going to tell them they are not coming back. And we're going to take away the National Assembly. We are coming to get them.
They don't want elections for the National Assembly, only presidential elections.
So that there are parliamentary elections. We want free elections in Venezuela, regulated, guarantees, a program of presidential elections.
Yet surprisingly, Henry Ramos Alup of the radical opposition changed the tune of that narrative.
Let's get ready to go to the elections as the Constitution says we have to, which are the National Assembly elections. Or are we going to stay seated?
All while Chavismo continues to actively reject the unilateral and coercive economic sanctions of the United States and is preparing to defend its vote.
Has invited Ethiopia to hold talks and find a lasting solution to its border conflict with Somalia. Kenya's Interior Minister Fred Matiang'i, who was representing President Uhuru Kenyatta, posted on his Twitter account about his meeting with Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed in Addis Ababa. The meeting was the second after the leaders recently met in Kenya over the same issue. The two countries have been trading accusations of interference by using the border to support militant insurgencies. A 15-year-old Palestinian demonstrator was killed by Israeli troops in the occupied West Bank during a protest against illegal Israeli land grabs. The Palestinian Health Ministry confirmed the death of Mohammed Hamayel, shot with a live bullet while rallying on Mount Orma in Beita. The occupation forces opened fire and shot tear gas in response to protesters who had thrown rocks. At least 18 others were reportedly wounded by rubber-coated bullets. We'll be right back, don't go away. Most of the cases being of people who came from different European countries.
Now I want to assure South Africans that there is no sick person we are bringing back, there is no sickness that we are bringing back, and those who might have concerns that the quarantine area, which we are not going to disclose now, may be too close to where they live, I can assure you that no disease is going to spill out of that area because they are not sick, and we just making absolutely certain.
Britain's Health Minister Nadine Dorries has been diagnosed with coronavirus. The Department of Health and Social Care, DHSC, confirmed that Dorries had tested positive for the virus. The identity of the individual who infected her is unknown. Focus will now fall on tracking down and testing the potentially hundreds of people Dorries would have made contact with in the past week, both in Parliament and the Health Department. She also attended a Downing Street reception last week for International Women's Day, where Prime Minister Boris Johnson was present. NATO military exercises in Norway, which were set to begin on Thursday, have been cancelled due to COVID-19 concerns. The drills were intended to gather 15,000 NATO and allied soldiers from 8 countries, including the United States, France, Germany, and the UK. The Armed Forces of Norway said that they wanted to avoid being a burden on the civilian healthcare system following the positive diagnosis of a Norwegian soldier last week. 240 soldiers are still in quarantine as a result.
The situation has changed dramatically since yesterday. The coronavirus is now out of control in the Norwegian society, and the public health service don't have control of the trail of infection. It's a completely new situation. To make sure that the Norwegian armed forces are prepared for battle and able to support the civil society in a challenging time ahead, and not to put a strain on the already strained health service, we choose to cancel the exercise.
And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Until next time.